Okay, so you know how sometimes a story breaks and it's all over the news and everyone's talking about it, but it feels like there's so much going on that it's hard to really wrap your head around what happened and what it all
Oh,
means.
yeah, totally. I feel like that happens all the time.
Right. And so that's where we come in.
Exactly.
You sent us this article about something that happened at Westosha Central High School up in Wisconsin, and it feels like one of those stories with a lot of layers.
Definitely lots of different angles to consider.
So we're diving into it to give you like the clear breakdown so you can, really understand what went down, what the main points of disagreement are, what this particular article is saying about it all, and then, think about the bigger picture stuff too.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So the source we're looking at here is from the Bible News and Worship Network.
Okay.
It's an article written by Pastor G. And he goes into this incident that happened back in December 2024.
All right. December 2024, what happened?
So we're talking about a high school, Westosha Central High. And there was a situation during a PE class, specifically in the girls' locker room.
Okay. Locker room situation, always a bit sensitive.
Right. And what happened was there were these two students, both biologically female,
Okay.
and they encountered a transgender female student in the locker room with them.
I see. So we've got biological sex and gender identity right at the forefront here.
Exactly. And the article makes it very clear that this transgender student is biologically male.
Okay, so that distinction is really important to the way Pastor G is framing this whole thing.
Yeah, it's definitely central to the article's perspective. And what happened was these two female students, they felt uncomfortable with this situation.
Makes sense. I mean, locker rooms are pretty private spaces.
Right. It's about as personal as it gets in a school setting. So they reported this incident to the school administration.
Okay, so they went through the proper channels to make their feelings known.
Yeah, they did. And that's where things get a little bit, murky, according to the article anyway.
So what was the school's response?
Well, according to Pastor G, the school administration didn't take any action after this report.
No action at all.
Nope. Not that the article mentions anyway. And to make matters worse, the article says that a gym teacher actually addressed the students' concerns, but in a way that was dismissive.
Oh, wow. Dismissive how?
The article claims the gym teacher told them that objecting to the transgender student's presence was basically bullying.
Wow. So not only were their concerns seemingly ignored, but they were also kind of told they were in the wrong for even having those feelings.
That's how the article presents it.
It's going to be frustrating.
Definitely. And that really sets the stage for the whole rest of the story, because then the article talks about the dilemma these girls faced.
What kind of dilemma?
Well, think about it. They're in this locker room situation that they've already said makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
But now they've reported it and nothing's changed.
So what were their options?
Basically, they had three not-so-great choices.
Okay, lay it on me.
Option one was to just go ahead and change in the locker room, like usual, with the transgender student present.
Which obviously they were not okay with.
Right. Option two was to try and use these private stalls that were in the locker room.
Okay, so at least some level of privacy.
Yeah, but the article describes these stalls as inadequate.
Inadequate? How?
It doesn't really specify, but you can imagine maybe there weren't enough of them, maybe they're too small. Whatever it was, the article is implying that they weren't a real solution.
Gotcha. So not a great option either.
And then there was option three, which was to basically avoid changing at all.
Which, yeah, not really an option if you've got gym class.
Exactly. But that's the thing. The article says that by trying to use these private stalls or by taking extra time to change game, the girls were risking being late to class.
Ah, so now you're adding in the whole school rules factor.
Exactly. And we all know how strict schools can be about tardiness.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So the article says these girls started getting hit with those consequences.
Tardy slips, detentions, the whole 9 yards.
Pretty much. They were getting tardy notices, unexcused absences on their record.
Which, yeah, can really mess with your grades and stuff.
For sure. And the article focuses in on one of these students in particular because her situation got especially bad.
No, what happened?
So this student, she was already anxious about the whole locker room situation.
Understandably.
But then with the tardiness and the absences piling up, her anxiety just got worse.
So it's like a snowball effect.
Exactly. And it ended up with her getting an F in gym class.
Wow, an F. That's rough.
Yeah, and ultimately she actually withdrew from the school district completely.
Seriously. She left the whole school because of this.
That's what the article says. And
Yeah.
you can see how this whole situation just had this huge ripple effect on her life.
Absolutely. So at this point, it's gone way beyond just feeling uncomfortable in the locker room. It's affecting her education, her mental health, everything.
Exactly. And that's what led to the next big development, which was legal action.
Okay, so things escalated beyond the school level.
Yeah, the parents of these students, they weren't messing around. They got a lawyer from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, that's Will,
Okay.
and they filed a Title IX complaint.
Title IX, now that's a big deal.
It is. It's a federal law that basically says you can't discriminate based on sex when it comes to education.
Right, so they're claiming the school discriminated against these girls.
Exactly. They filed this complaint with the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights and with the U.S. Department of Justice.
So they went all the way to the federal level.
They did. And the core of their argument, according to the article, was that the school put these girls' safety and privacy at risk by not doing anything about the locker room situation.
So they're saying the school's inaction created a hostile environment.
That's the gist of it. And they're saying that by allowing a biologically male transgender student into the girls' locker room, the school violated Title IX.
So that's where the whole debate about how Title IX applies to gender identity comes in.
Exactly, because the law is about sex discrimination, but how do you apply that when you're talking about transgender students? It's a really complicated area, legally speaking.
It is, for sure, and it's something that courts are still figuring out.
Right. And the article really dives into the specific issues that it sees as being at the heart of this whole incident.
Okay, so let's break those down. What's the first one?
Well, the most obvious one is the privacy concern.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? These girls feeling uncomfortable and embarrassed about having to change in front of someone who's biologically male, even though that person identifies as female.
Exactly. And the article really emphasizes that locker rooms are supposed to be these private spaces where you can expect a certain level of privacy based on biological sex.
Makes sense. I mean, it's where you're changing clothes, showering, all that.
Right. It's about as intimate a setting as you can get in a public school.
So the article's saying that this basic expectation of privacy was violated.
That's the argument. And then issue number 2 is the school's response, or rather the lack of response.
Right, because the article claims the school administration basically did nothing.
Yeah, and remember, the article also says that a gym teacher actually dismissed the girls' concerns and basically accused them of bullying.
So it's like a double whammy. First, their concerns are ignored, and then they're made to feel bad for even raising them.
Exactly. And that's what the article is highlighting as a major problem.
So it's not just about the locker room itself. It's about how the school handled the whole situation.
Right. It's about feeling heard and respected and protected. And the article is arguing that the school failed on all those counts.
Which leads us to issue number 3, the academic penalties.
Right, because remember, these girls, they were trying to find ways to avoid the locker room situation.
By using the private stalls or whatever.
Yeah, but that led to them being tardy or missing class time.
And then they got in trouble for that.
Exactly. Tardy notices unexcused absences and in one case, even a failing grade.
Wow. So the school is punishing them for trying to protect their privacy.
That's the argument the article is making. And that brings us to issue number 4, which is the impact on the student's mental health.
Right, because this whole thing obviously took a toll on them emotionally.
Absolutely. The article specifically mentions increased anxiety, especially for the student who ended up leaving the school altogether.
It's like this whole situation just became too much for her to handle.
And the article is using that to show how serious this issue is. It's not just about discomfort. It's about real emotional distress.
So it's about creating a school environment where all students feel safe and supported.
Exactly. And then the final issue the article brings up is that whole Title IX question.
Right, because the parents filed a legal complaint based on Title IX.
And the article really leans into the argument that the school violated these girls' rights under Title IX by prioritizing the transgender students' accommodation over their right to privacy and safety.
So it's framing this as a case where one group's rights were put ahead of another's.
And that's really the crux of the article's perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that this article is coming from a specific viewpoint.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is from the Bible News and Worship Network.
Right. So it's coming from a Christian perspective.
Exactly. And that really comes through in how the article connects this whole incident to certain biblical principles.
Okay, so let's talk about those. What's the first one?
Well, the first one is modesty and privacy, and they're using 1 Timothy 2.9 as the basis for that.
1 Timothy 2.9. Okay, and how do they relate that to this situation?
Basically, they're saying that sharing a locker room with someone of the opposite biological sex goes against those biblical principles of modesty and purity.
So even though the transgender student identifies as female, the article is focusing on the biological sex difference.
Right. And they're saying that forcing these girls to be in that situation puts them in conflict with their own beliefs about modesty.
Which for them might stem directly from their faith.
Exactly. And then the second principle they bring up is about respecting other people's convictions, and they cite Romans 14.13 for that one.
Romans 14:13.1323. Got it. What's the connection there?
Well, they're basically saying that by making these girls go against their beliefs about modesty and privacy, the school was disrespecting those convictions.
So it's not just about the girls feeling uncomfortable. It's about them feeling like their beliefs were disregarded.
Right. And the article is framing that as a violation of this biblical principle of being considerate of other people's deeply held beliefs.
So it's bringing in this idea of religious freedom as well.
Yeah, it's adding that layer to the whole discussion. And then the third biblical principle they talk about is about protecting the vulnerable.
Okay, and they're using Philippians 2.4 for that.
Right. And they're basically saying that these girls were in a vulnerable position in this locker room situation and that the school should have protected them.
So they're connecting this idea of vulnerability with a need for the school to step in and ensure all students feel safe.
Exactly. And they're using that biblical principle to support their argument.
So you can see how this article is very deliberately tying this specific incident to these broader biblical principles.
Absolutely. It's making a clear connection between their faith and their perspective on this situation.
And ultimately, the article comes down pretty firmly on the side of these female students.
Oh, yeah, they're very clear about that. They even state outright that in their view, the transgender girls' rights were seen as more important than the biological female students' rights.
So they're saying there was a clear imbalance in how the school approached this.
Exactly. And that's a pretty strong statement.
It is. And it really highlights the tension that can exist between accommodating transgender students and ensuring the privacy and comfort of other students.
And that's something that a lot of schools are grappling with right now.
Definitely. It's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
Right. And this whole case at Westosha Central, it just brings all those complexities to the surface.
For sure. It's a microcosm of this larger societal debate.
Exactly. And so by taking this deep dive into this article, we've really gotten to see how all these different pieces fit together.
We've got the initial incident in the locker room, the girls' discomfort, their attempts to report it, the school's response or lack thereof, the academic penalties, the mental health impact, the Title IX complaint, and then all the biblical principles that the article uses to frame its perspective.
Exactly. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it really makes you think about how we balance all these different rights and needs and beliefs within our schools.
Right. Because ultimately, we want schools to be safe and inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to do that is the challenge.
In this case, it just shows how difficult that can be sometimes.
It does. And it leaves us with some really tough questions to ponder. Like, how can schools best navigate these situations where different rights and beliefs come into conflict?
Right. And how can we ensure that all students feel respected and protected regardless of their gender identity or their religious beliefs?
Big questions for sure. And there's no easy answers, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
Definitely, because at the end of the day, it's about creating a school environment where everyone can thrive.
That's the goal. And cases like this one, they force us to confront the challenges and keep working towards that goal.
So it's not just about what happened at Westosha Central, it's about what we learn from it and how we move forward as a society.
Exactly. It's about taking these complex issues seriously and having those difficult conversations in order to create a better future for all students.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I'm glad we could dive into this together.
Me too. It's been an eye-opening deep dive for sure.
Definitely. And hopefully it's given our listeners a lot to think about as well.
That's the goal. Always.
Always.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap things up here. But keep those questions coming, folks, because we'll be back with another deep dive soon.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, take care, everyone, and keep thinking critically.
And stay curious.
And stay curious. Yeah.